Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely."
Hello, good evening and welcome to another Webster report and another evening of technical issues. Obviously can tell we're running a little bit late as per usual, but you know, these things seem to happen every week. Don't seem to have any trouble with the PC or tech equipment, and Alex seems to do the same. But we seem to do these shows, and we just don't. We don't seem to be able to get past these bits. We're trying to talk about some really meaty subjects, Alex, and it's hard sometimes to differentiate whether there's a battle going on here or we're just getting paranoid as we're getting older, mate. What do you think?
Well, like you said at the beginning, with that Young clip, short and sweet, accept oneself. And that's, that doesn't align with, say, a Christian point of view. But it is a starting point. And when you talk about things like, do we get paranoid about stuff? Do we think there's some, like, I don't know, cyber plot or something, or some spirituality on the airways? Well, we should expect that there'll be blockages in life in general, because no one ever has it easy. I mean, you think about it, we've got like many paths that separate individuals walk. Everybody is completely unique who's walked the face of this planet. Even identical twins do not have exactly the same experience. So this is what leads a lot of people to say, well, there's many paths. There's as many paths as there are people, and therefore you've got to expect glitches. It's not like there's some cosmically coordinated or humanly coordinated conspiracy. It's just there's that many loose ends floating around that you can't help but get caught in the crosswinds sometimes. But then our position is that, well, many lives, one path. And then people go, oh, how bigoted is that? Many lives, only one path. But if you think about it, there's only one ultimate truth. The nature of reality, we see it with our senses, and then others claim that they've got extra sensory perception, so they claim they can see beyond what the senses suggest. But whichever path you take, people make these claims about ultimate reality and ultimate truth. And if there is an ultimate truth, then all the other things that are not that truth are not true. Doesn't mean they're completely false. They might have shades or elements of that truth, but ultimately, we either believe there's a single unified truth behind everything, or we don't. Now, even if there is, right, say there's one truth, one God that we speak of in Christianity, that doesn't mean there aren't any other beings. It doesn't mean that there aren't other entities trying to muddy the waters or confound the plot. So just because there's one truth, it doesn't mean that there aren't many facets and, as we've said many times in the past, Paul, cosmic battling going on, so there are these efforts to confound, should we say, the facts of the matter, the state of reality, how things actually are. We know time and time again, every week when we come back, the world appears to be a certain way. It looks to be a certain way. And yet we can't even agree on what that is. Even truthers, without any sort of semblance of faith, they can't agree. Such and such is a shill. No, they're not. The earth's flat. No, it isn't. So there's that many contentious positions all around us that it's surprising that we come to anything definitive. And yet here we are. We've got something in common. We're all looking for explanations, at least, even though we don't feel like we're looking for some ultimate reality. We're looking for explanations about what's going on in the world as a way of explaining what's going on in our personal lives. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything, really. There could well be nefarious efforts to shut us or anybody else down. It could just be chance. It could be coincidence. But one thing we know is we're here now.
Well, the way, like I said, this week it's I've not been able to get as prepared as normal because the vaccinated have actually done their bit. They've managed to get hold of me. First time in 3 years, Alex, that a head cold or any form of cold has touched me. And, you know, all of a sudden I thought, hey, I'm not. Wednesday evening, I started to feel this bit of my eyes were a bit heavy, and I thought, I feel a bit of back of my throat. I thought, bloody hell, where's this coming from? And then all of a sudden, everybody I'm speaking with is coming down with something. You know, it's like there's been this. Where has this come from? You know, because we've been told that, you know, the hospitals are now inundated. Don't go to A&E. Yeah, I'm seeing people who are saying, well, if we try and get a GP's appointment, we end up ringing 111. They tell us to go to A&E. We go to A&E and they tell us, don't come to A&E. Get in touch with your doctors. So we've got all this merry-go-round. We've got all this information where you said people are asking questions. Well, they're all asking questions about all different things that lead you in all different places. And we don't tend to see the people who are giving us these directions. And again, we've got to go back to what we've been taught. Can we be humble enough to accept that the information that we've been given might not be of sound foundation? When you know I do try and look really deep to find out why the debt-based economy, the gas, water, and electric stuff, shook me so much. But the thing is, if my mum and dad could be fooled and then pass that on to me to pay bills that you've already worked and paid for, and you know that your agreement in this is to be able to balance these books by using this specific instrument that's all there right in front of you. Why didn't we know this? Why didn't we do that? Why were people willing to attack me and others who were working on it to say that, to try and prove that we were wrong rather than exposing the evil? And then when you find out, we were talking about when we go into scriptures about the lawless society, Alex, and we're looking around and we're seeing stabbings and rapings and all this kind of stuff, and we're saying, hey, it's getting lawless. But there's no justice in the courts. We're being dragged into jurisdictions by our own actions, and those actions are being acted upon. So when it all comes down to being our fault, and people say, well, we didn't know, and their answer is that ignorance of the law is no excuse, you can see the frustration. I mean, I saw it with the people who wanted to prove that being a free man on the land, it was totally different jurisdiction, and it so was. But what people did, well, with that, going into those commercial courts and saying those things, it set a precedent for a lot of other things, because people were standing there and saying, I'm a man, and the judge was saying to the opposition, he says he's a man, they'd agree, and then he'd say that he had no contract. And he'd look to the opposition and he'd say, he has no contract. And he said, we agree, he has no contract with us. And then they'd ask, well, how are you going to pay this? Now, if you are stood there and engaging and you say, I'm not paying, they're only accepting that legal name. Now, if you refuse that legal name, as we've seen with a bench warrant, you're stood in that court, they issue a bench warrant while you're stood there for not turning up because you won't accept that name. So the lawlessness has already been here, Alex, but I certainly didn't discover it until about 15 years ago, when I saw what these courts operated like, when they were willing to call armed police on me to stop something being exposed. It's really strange to live and work through that. And then when you're trying to join the dots to bigger and bigger and bigger, and I sent you a link earlier. It's strange how all these things come to me. With you have Prince Charles, who we spoke about on the show before, that he boasts that he's a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler. And when you start to just scratch the surface of what Vlad was up to, what he was doing, where he was decimating women because he knew that women was the backbone, the structure of society, and he knew that this would, and what's happened is he's claiming direct descendants of that, and Hollywood is romanticizing it as, oh, he was just this seductive vampire that came round, and he wasn't. He was putting women on stakes next to the daughters with their entire families, and you think, wow. And you're boasting about being a direct descendant of that. And then we see the bumbling people that we have in society today. And you say that can't be true. It can't be true what they get up to. It's not true, Alex, that up to 250 years ago, it was documented that royalty in Europe would eat human flesh, would have human parties to hunt humans. We've seen this in many, many different types of films where it's been glorified, but there's always a goodie at the end to stop it all, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we're creating all this crap and chaos, but we're your saviors as well. And it's like, it's happening right in front of us now. This peace board, is it going to be this 12? Is it going to be this 10? Is it going to start developing where we're going to start to see things really moving on? Because at this moment, I can't see how it could slow down now, Alex. They've got to go for it, haven't they?
Yeah, they do. I mean, the thing is, as we know, most of us are watching a movie, and unless we ask the question, why do I believe what I believe, then you're actually in the land of assumptions. You're just making assumptions all the time, watching a movie, getting a popcorn out, and waiting to see what happens next. And, because you ask those ultimate questions, well, why do I believe in God and Christ today and not any other belief system that I could have chosen? And I wasn't part of a religious family, so I wasn't socialized into going to church. So it's not like it was as natural as breathing because I'd always done it. So I remember some old Welsh miner turned up driving along the streets where I used to live in his car with a loud hailer on top. And I was just hanging out with 2 or 3 friends, sat on my own front wall outside my mum and dad's old house. And I was with I think it was two girls and a lad. And he just pulled over and he told us about this local church with a youth group, and did we want to go to the youth group? And we all went, all 4 of us, and I was the only one who consolidated going. And I only carried on going because I fancied this particular girl in this church. No, there was no profound reason. I didn't listen to the message as such. It's just the message that was going on there. And I kept going because I think I'd been a bit sheltered. All the things that happened to me in life, I was a bit worried about being bullied. This place felt safe. So I was just gradually exposed to the message over time. I didn't really believe it, because it was a social investment that I had. I wanted people contact. But for whatever the reason, I just kept on going. Rejected the message overtly. And then in 1987, I ended up doing this Ouija board, which shocked my sort of materialist paradigm, seeing is believing. Now, how and why did all that happen? Was it orchestrated? Was it organized by a divine hand? Well, yeah, from my perspective, absolutely. But what happens if you don't have that view? You're just born, you're milling around, you're doing stuff, you don't end up in a church. What is it that gets people to ask questions at a deeper level than just, the level at which reality presents itself? Why do people ask these questions? Why do they go deeper? Why do they not settle for the assumptions that they've had passed down to them by their parents and by the teachers? Because there's a lot of forces. We know Rockefeller, 1909, the education system, designing it on an institutional prison basis. Read out the class register, and there you go. I can still remember mine. I'm not going to do the party trick, which I do for people from time to time. I can remember my class register from 46 years ago. But it was like, yes, miss, or yes, sir. Yes, I'm attending, I'm present, I'm here, whatever that meant. You didn't really have to be present. You could hate the education. You just had to issue the statements of conformity. Yeah, I've not wagged it. I'm physically here. All the statistics are in place. And beyond that, nobody's really bothered. Then just competing over grades. I got an A, I got a C, or I'm better than you then. So what is it? What is it that gets people to ask questions when so much of our training is in a blind spot? We don't even see it because everyone shares the same assumptions. So it's not just our parents, it's the schooling system, it's everything is geared up to numb us to a deeper reality. So, yeah, to answer your question, it's not clear. It's really not clear. It's a bit like a little chick when it breaks out of an egg. You know, it's like a certain amount of strength, energy, and determination is required to break through something that to us is really quite brittle viewed from the outside. But the amount of energy required for that little chick to break through, it's pretty much, there's a critical point at which that happens. And if it doesn't happen, you'd stay entombed. So, but we know in that case, life finds a way, that spark of life, and the chick breaks out of the egg, it's born, and it starts a life cycle. So what is it for us that is the equivalent of a spiritual breakthrough or a truth breakthrough? What is it exactly? Are we just at the whim of cosmic forces, or do we play a part in it? And I think these are the questions, because when you start talking about conditioning that gets passed down, it's a surprise that anyone breaks free of it. So what is it? Is it pain? Is it dissatisfaction? Is it persecution and punishment? What is it that makes some people wake up and other people don't? Because the vast majority of people traditionally do not wake up until things get really bad. And that's where we seem to be getting now. But even then, when people start to wake up, no matter what you think about the political scene, this Zach Polanski, Ed Davey, they're all talking about coalition, stop Farage at all costs. It doesn't even matter what the merits and demerits of Farage are. System and anti-system conflict is going on right across the world. In America, the traditional system's been overthrown, but maybe to be really, replaced by a deeper form of the same system, but one that looks better. And, obviously Taylor's going to be on there and he said, no, it is better. And it's just a matter of time. You're not sitting on your hands waiting. It is a matter of time. We are going to be rescued. We can be passive. It's all right. We can wait. We don't have to do anything because the cavalry's coming in. Blow the bugle. We're going to be rescued. So we've got all these really big decisions at every turn. To what degree do we participate? To what degree do we trust? Because when you trust, a lot of the time you get trussed up like a chicken and spit roast on the barbecue. So trust is a delicate issue these days. There's no trust in politicians, rightly so. So what do we trust in? Do we trust at all? I think it's a very perilous place that we're in now, Paul, and people have got to have courage. They've got to have courage and they've got to make some big decisions about how they're going to align with what they think truth is.
But if they haven't got an inkling that there's anything going wrong, then the trap doesn't set, does it? Yeah, I mean, you're saying now that, well, we can both see that people are thinking there's something not right here, but the trap isn't set yet. Once that trap sets, that's where the people are then going to have that realization that something terrible is wrong. This is seemingly what we're going to get presented with. But is that too late then? I mean, I find this very interesting. I was doing some, trying to do some studying. My head's been in a bloody shed with this cold. When you're trying to think and it just feels like that every word's somebody's hitting you in the face with a hammer. Yeah. But it talks about things that are spoken in the dark. Jesus says that things that happened in the dark, nothing that is covered will be left covered. Everything's going to be uncovered. And he talks about the people who are trying to expose evil and it doesn't look like you've got much of a platform. Those voices, the voices like ours, because what can we do, Alex? We've been in the lion's den with these bastards, I've stood in court toe to toe with these people and exposed the evil and their fraud and their corruption and what they've participated in that have killed people. You know, they would say, oh no, people took their own lives. No, they killed them. And to experience that people think that they're doing a good thing, they're just doing a job in these places, when they're not. They're participating, the joint enterprise in a system that has lied to people. And as I keep saying, Alex, if I'm taught things, what life is from the age of 5, and then you get to 40 and then realize that everything you've been taught is wrong, you sit there, who am I? Who are we? What are we doing here? Why are you saving up and working so hard to pay for that house that you can never pay off? For that car that they're going to take off you? For that holiday to get 2 weeks away because everything will be okay when you get back? Once upon a time, those were like little remedies that would fix things. Now you can't fix anything. Now there's not enough. You know, people just want and want and want, and it doesn't seem to matter where that comes from anymore. You see people going into shops and just taking stuff and walking out, and you know, up until recently anyway, nobody was stopping them. You know, when my mum ran the shop, my dad always said, "Don't. If anybody comes in trying to rob you, just let them take it." She says, "Do you think I'm going to let somebody just take what I've worked so hard for? You must think I'm daft." You know, we had a 10-stone Alsatian to help as well, but my mum wouldn't have backed down from somebody saying, "Give her the takings out of the till." I can hear her now saying, "I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning."
Yeah, exactly. Some people are trying to make an honest living, and other people are parasiting. It's a dog-eat-dog world that we've inherited.
But I think the courts have got to. I think we've got to see justice coming in the courts, and we've got to be wary about. There's a lot of talk about Christianity, but again, when we speak of Christianity, I have to put it in speech marks, because if you look at me when I say I'm a Christian and you see a Roman Catholic, then you know there's an issue there, because every single religion that claims to follow Jesus don't seem to follow Jesus. You know, I've said before, I have friends who work in Christian schools, and the Board of Governors voted that they don't need to teach more about Jesus. Well, that tells me that you don't believe in the doctrine that the school's meant to be based upon. If it's multi-faith and then all paths lead to God, then you've gone completely away from the scripture. So how can you even consider that you are now a Christian? How does it work, Alex? I don't understand it. I've admired you with this stuff for so long. How does it sit if it goes against what it says in the Bible? How does it sit with somebody to say, yeah, what God means is this, and they change it completely to accommodate sins, basically? You know, I've said many a time when there was a time where I was seeing 3 women at the same time. Everybody, you know, and there was nobody getting hurt. It was all consensual. It was all great fun. But I knew I had to not do that, because God says don't. And that sin is the same as committing adultery, and is the same as homosexuality, is the same as murdering. There's no differentiation. If you steal a pencil, you might as well have stole the house. It's the same principle. It's the same type of sin. It's not singling things out to be worse than anything else. You know, it's not. There is no greater sin from one thing or the other. You've just committed sin, and that means you have no way out of this world unless somebody comes and gives us a remedy, because we can't get ourselves out of it. And that is basically the underlying story from start to finish in the Bible. You know, we've messed up. We've got all this mess now. How do we get out of it? We can't get out of it, but don't worry. Listen to me. This is my promise. When I come, I'll fix everything, and then all you're going to do is believe. That's it. Can we do that? Well, first of all, we've got to be humble enough and think that we might have been taught a few things that are wrong. And I think that's what you're hinting at, Alex, that people are actually knowing that they've been taught things that just aren't quite right, but they're accepting things on certain levels, but they're not seeing that Russian doll effect. We've got to we've got to really bang on about this Russian doll effect, because we're seeing things that are close up, but we're not seeing things that's going on that's quite behind us. As we come into Russian dolls, that should be a good introduction for Taylor. How are you doing, mate? Are you with us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
All right, it's good. So how's it going, everybody?
Well, me and Alex have been fighting an attack by the vaccinated because they've made everybody ill, and whatever it is that they're spraying, who knows? We're going into all kinds of conspiracies because all of a sudden I started to not feel great on a Wednesday, and then come Thursday, everybody who I knew has, got some kind of ailment to this. And it just so happens that, you need to go and get your boosters and this, that, and the other, and you need to put your masks back on. But I do seem to see that there's a massive pushback on this stuff now. I don't, it's almost like they've tested the water and said, yeah, this isn't gonna float anymore. This is gonna sink straight to the bottom. But we'll have to wait and see on that. So me and Alex haven't been that great this week, Taylor. So we're just trying to get through the show. We might only do maybe till only 9:30, maybe a bit before. So have you got stuff to bring forward and to join dots for us as well? From your perspective.
Go ahead. Wait, what'd you say?
I'm saying from your perspective.
Yeah, I do actually. What's it called? It's been a bit of a, well, let's just say it's been a bit of a hectic week when it comes to the mainstream optics of things. Of course, for someone like me who sees through the optics, it's just like, you don't get caught up in the reactionary emotional tides of the normies. So regardless, it's still important to go over these, just because this is something that is what's the word I'm looking for? It's important to see where the normies stand in terms of the psychological warfare that is being used in order to try to straighten them out. So first of all, let me just go ahead and just go over this recent thing that happened in Minneapolis. Two things. Interestingly enough, like Minneapolis has been Minnesota's been a bit of a hotbed recently, which is pretty interesting. It makes sense, of course, when you consider all the decades of Minnesota kind of being used as one of the heads of the snake, so to speak, when it comes to fraud and when it comes to deep state activity in the North America and in the country of the United States. So first of all, you had that that so-called shooting in I think it was on Wednesday that happened in Minnesota. I forget what town it was. With this woman who, after on found out, we'll just put it that way. Some anomalies, like say the color of the truck changes depending on what camera is depending on which footage you're looking at or what angle you're looking at. I've seen people say that that the shot doesn't align right. I've seen some various things, but I'm not going to say which one that I absolutely believe. All I'll say is, assuming that it's real, is that, well, F around and find out. You know what I mean? You try to block ICE vehicles, and you end up trying to run over an officer with a loaded weapon. By the way, that's a very good idea. And then they shoot you. Well, that's just what happens. You know what I mean? That's just what happens.
To be fair, after seeing that footage from the body cam of the ICE agent that took the fatal shot, you can see virtually she either hits him or runs over his foot as she moves forward. So yeah, you're right if you do stuff like that. But what I'm interested in, Taylor, and I know you say things like the normies and it's all the optics and stuff, but what we're seeing here from an outsider's perspective, from sitting over here, I see Trump and whatever Trump's wagon is, whoever's funding it, whoever they are, right? But I see them doing what they do with Venezuela, taking all control of oil tankers that are, commissioned for Russia, and that makes Putin rattle his cage and stuff like that. We then see him saying that we're going to take over Greenland. So this is two countries that he's saying he's virtually going to invade. Now, Stalin was doing this in the 30s before Hitler then did it. So the first question is there a difference between what Trump's doing and what they're doing? But then filtering it into the optics, Taylor, with you've now just done strikes on Syria again on ISIS targets. Yeah, ISIS are the ones who are running the government there. So it's starting to get a little bit confusing for the normies. And I think that is why Sky, BBC don't report on these things. I mean, we're virtually looking, there's a revolution happening in Iran, and there's not really much happening if you watch the mainstream news over here. So if you can touch on them for us. Have you got anything to share as well, by the way? I've got a couple of videos, one that you might find interesting with Mr. Netanyahu, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, that's I have a feeling I know. I have a feeling I know what you're gonna play, but I'm not gonna assume anything. So
yeah, don't assume. Don't assume. So have you got anything to share? Have you got something to share, as in a graphic?
Yeah, give me a second. I just wanted to touch on a couple things before I did that.
Well, do you want me to play this? Do you want me to play this Netanyahu video first, then?
You can if you want. I just wanted to get done with talking about what happened in Minnesota first.
Go on then.
Okay, so this and then at the same time we have the other thing, which was of course all the Somali daycare fraud being exposed. It's very interesting that all of this is happening at the same time when it comes to the Somali stuff. It's crazy because like the year just started. We're less than a month in, only about a couple weeks in, and it's just like there's already so much big hectic stuff that's going on, and so it looks like we might be heading to a climax of this movie soon. I'm not going to make predictions, and I'm not assuming anything. I'm just making an educated guess that we might be heading to a climax here soon, which I'm hoping for. But yeah, we also had the announcement that quote unquote Tim Walz will not. I say quote in quotes because it's probably not him, but regardless, it's is not going to be running for a mayor again. So there's that. There's the optics of one of the old establishment Democrats, another one going down. That feeds upon all the resignations we've had over the last several years, ever since Q made his famous post about how there will be resignations on both parties, Republicans and Democrats. We have the mainstream media defending Maduro, saying that what's it called? That Trump invaded a sovereign nation and yada yada yada. And then of course the Greenland thing, as you mentioned. So it's getting pretty hectic at the start of the year. Is it going to remain like that? Who knows? They could go back to being quiet again here real soon. I will mention though about the Greenland thing real quick. I up until recently I was thinking, okay, what's so special about Greenland, right? It's just some place in the Arctic or whatever. And then I realized, oh wait a minute.
Minerals.
Well, it's not about minerals. Well, I mean, I guess it's a little bit about the minerals, but then I realized, oh wait a minute. This is in the North American continent. This is in the Western Hemisphere. Now it makes perfect sense. It's called the Monroe Doctrine. The idea of get the F out of our hemisphere, we're the ones in control of our hemisphere, essentially. So, we're basically telling all of these other countries who have been, like China and Russia, who have been circling Greenland for years, basically get the F out, or at least that's the optics of it. So there's that. And then you have Trump saying he's going to buy Greenland from Denmark, which makes sense. I mean, most of the people in Greenland are okay with this idea, and because Denmark hasn't protected them in decades anyway, so who gives a damn? So there's that. But I'll go ahead and let you play your video now, because I feel like I've said pretty much all I need to say about that end.
Okay, mate. Let's see what you think of this one. Eventually.
You've been accused of being a war criminal. That if you went to go to several countries in Europe, you're going to get arrested. This is not just mad campus radicalism. This is a feeling around the world. You said it to yourself to us just now. In public opinion around the world, Israel is doing very poorly. And it's doing very poorly because people see a country that is behaving in a way that is not compatible with being a liberal democracy. And therefore, I think you have a problem. I think that loss of public opinion struck you from your autobiography was how subtly and for how long you have understood this. You know that political power comes from public opinion, and you know that you need to win the battle of public opinion, and you're losing it. You've absolutely lost it in Europe, but much more worryingly for you, you're losing it in America. Israel is behaving in a way that we think is incompatible with the kind of liberal democracy that we claim.
Well, the liberal democracy is the ideas, the values that we cherish.
And it really isn't just extreme radicals. There are huge numbers of people who are concerned about Israel's behavior. Frankly, including people like me.
Anybody else see that Mr. Netanyahu wanted to shoot her in the face, or was it just me?
Well, first of all, I could barely understand any of that. What was being said? The audio quality was kind of bad.
Perhaps it's your device as well as my quality then. Alex, have you anything to say, mate?
I don't know, really. It's a standard thing about Netanyahu. I don't know what I think about him. It's really difficult, there's so much hype around Israel, the state, and whether it's a rogue state or not, and how much influence, see, I can't even say the Jews, because, Jewish people, Jewish hierarchies have. We know that all groups have got mafiosi aspects to them. So I've never seen it as nation specific. I read in the Old Testament, I was reading Deuteronomy earlier, again, this idea that Israel thinks they're special because God chose them. And they don't look at why God chose them. And this is why they're going down the path that they are blindly, and they have done for so long, trusting in foreign powers, making pacts with those that God said don't make pacts with. So they appear to be a religiously adhering nation, and yet on another level, they totally reprobate still. So it's very difficult to know, because Netanyahu is part of an overall sort of notion of the secular Israelite state that just seems to have lost its bearings completely in terms of that covenant. And of course, then we've got the added perspective from Romans 11. Paul says they're going to get grafted back in. We know that when the full number of the Gentiles has come in, God turns his attention back to Israel. So, I mean, just on a slight aside, I know that we're talking about Netanyahu, but through random reasons, I end up having this Jewish female friend on my friends list, and she's been posting loads of stuff on and off recently. Well, last probably 2 or 3 years, big storm in America, I can't remember which one it was, and her property got wiped out, and she lost her marriage at the same time. It hadn't been in place very long. She subsequently got it annulled, But she's making loads of posts now. Classic Jewish posts, right? Traditional, not Orthodox, but traditional Jewish. And it's all about covenant, taking covenant seriously. She's been making references to Jesus, right? In terms of respecting him. But while remaining Jewish, so respecting him deeply, but still not accepting that he's Messiah. And I get this impression that she's a very deep person, and you can tell that, and she feels things very deeply, and she's struggling with stuff from her own personal circumstances. She's struggling with a lot of her fellow Jews not fulfilling the spirit of a lot of the festivals, so she's felt a bit abandoned, a bit derelict. And I posted something from Zechariah chapter 12 verse 9 about, you know, they will look on him whom they have pierced, which is one of these poignant prophecies in the Old Testament, pointing to that time when Israel finally recognizes Christ was the Messiah that they rejected. And this woman seems to be a bit of a bellwether. She's very deep. She's saying some words that seem to reflect a deep admiration of Jesus while still not accepting his Messiah. She seems to be on a path, on a journey, and I find that interesting. So if you look at something like Netanyahu, he's still a fully paid up secularist. He's still part of that history where, you know, the Israelites followed a lot of secular protection from secular powers and disobeyed God. People talk about Zionism, but Zionism really is not what people think it is. At its root, Zionism is just the idea that there will be a king on the throne of Israel forever in the type of King David. That's all Zionism is. It's the quest for a king. And God told the Israelites not to seek a king. Do not seek one. But of course they did, because they were disobedient. So of course God hatches a solution. He turns up as the king in human form. Okay, so these reprobates keep demanding a king when I tell them not to. I'll just turn that into a positive. I will incarnate. Isaiah prophesied it. I will come. God in human form, in flesh. I will be their king. He turns up in the form of Jesus, but not the kind of king they were expecting, so they reject him. And so I think Netanyahu is still in that long tradition, that long line of prophetic understanding that is Zionist in the sense that it's expecting a king, but it doesn't recognize the king that came. And this is where then Trump and others come in as these, you know, messianic figures, like King Cyrus or whatever, even if they're Gentiles. But of course, then, as we know, Trump, this kind of conversion motif to Judaism, and his son-in-law. So Jared Kushner, you know, there's definitely a moving shaker there. So there's lots of different strands converging here around Netanyahu. And when I look at any video or anything that he says or any grilling that he gets, it's so highly polarized, but no one ever seems to ask the pertinent questions about, why have you, as a Jew who claims that you've got a special status, why are you doing what Jews have always done? Which isn't a criticism of Jews, it's a criticism of human nature. It just so happens that the humans that we're criticizing happen to be Jews. Is why are you still following the traditions of men? Why are you still following the old vanity? Why are you still denying what it says in Deuteronomy, where God very clearly states early on in Deuteronomy, I didn't select you, I didn't choose you because you're special and important. I chose you for my reasons. I'm setting you apart. We know he set them apart to be a light to the Gentiles because God was a God of love. And he is a God of love who wants to save the Gentiles and the Jews. They still don't recognize it. So what part is Netanyahu playing? He's playing a pretty standard part that Jews have always played, misunderstanding that the Messiah has come and still waiting for him. And that's a dangerous state of play for the world, because who is going to show up?
Well, they made it pretty selective, because nobody will come to Jesus other than the Father call them, and you can see that how many people are still covered with that veil. The thing with Netanyahu is if we then incorporate Taylor's perceptions of it, that's not Netanyahu, that means that even that interview was a plan of him being exposed, because I mean, I could see that Netanyahu was looking at that interview, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't thinking, I wonder what I could get her for her birthday. I wonder could I send her a nice Christmas card. It didn't look like there was much nicety coming out of that fella's eyes towards her. Now he's being exposed, but if that's not Netanyahu, then that's all part of this play that is still playing out to that bigger picture. So even though we might say to Taylor that those things are playing out, but they are part of this other bigger picture. Well, as Taylor says, we're not going to see that until it starts coming out. It was when you were talking about Minnesota, Taylor. It's like there's nobody knows what's going on in Minnesota here. So people who watch this show over here, unless they're watching this show and heard us talking about it, they won't even know about the childcare stuff. The billions that have gone on childcare with no children there, where Somalians have been recording themselves playing with tape recordings of children answering in a class, doing selfie videos, and it's just bizarre that we see all this stuff playing out. And when you mention that God isn't done with Israel, it's so. When we start to look at what Israel is and who we're talking about, is it the tribes? You know, are they the chosen ones that God isn't done with? Because the Gentiles, there doesn't seem to be a number on the Gentiles, but there is numbers on the tribes. So I think the Gentiles and the Jews who are in the new covenant, who recognize Jesus as Messiah, they are Israel. That's the new covenant. But I also get that he hasn't done with his tribes. But I'm not so sure that Mr. Netanyahu, or I don't know what his proper name is, Milankovsky from Eastern Europe, I don't know what bearing he has on any of that, other than they're using capitalist Zionism to have a foothold in a country where, you know, it seems to be special, that soil, doesn't it? Because Satan certainly wants to put his throne there. That's where that's what this has always been about. We've talked about the Star of Remphan and Moloch. It's always been Moloch. Has been the in all different names and concepts. It's the same names, different gods. It's all the same stuff. We're just catching up now that all the mainstream religions have accepted enough of the poison for it to be diluted, and people to not have that fire of inspiration. You see a lot of it in the Christian groups, Alex, where I'm sure they've got bots on that just keep asking the same questions, like, what fruit did they eat in the Garden of Eden? You know, it's the same question every day, and you're thinking, there's nobody wanting to study the word to actually bear any fruit from that word, because it tells you to not do things. And it's not because God's a tyrannical God that wants to stop you having fun. It's the world that you're in. You doing that might not be good for you. Well, what's the consequence of that? Death. Oh, that's not a good thing. No. Well, what do I do? Well, don't do it. So if I don't do it, I'm not dead. Yeah, just stop doing it. Look for something else. But I like doing it. Okay, enjoy yourself then. But there's no way back from it. That's what this world is. We wanted to know the world of good and evil. We know it. Some people like the things that are bad, but they don't look bad, Alex. And what if society says that it's good? You know, what if society says it's okay to do that? What if society says that all you've got to do is go and sit in that booth with that old fella and tell him what you've done, and he'll tell you to do 5 Hail Marys and you count your rosary beads and you'll be fine? If that's what we're going to be relying on, then everything goes. I can raise my vibration and become Christ and go and make a planet for myself and have loads of wives, because we're all making just making stuff up. You know, when people say there's nobody coming for you, there's nobody coming to save you. Well, if the Bible and the scriptures are right, there's somebody that's already been and done it, and there's nobody else, and you can't do it yourself. So if we're wrong, Alex, we'll all have a laugh about it at some point, won't we? But if we're not wrong, if we're not wrong and nobody's bothered looking at it, then there's going to be some red faces. You know, I've taken some abuse because people think that I'm going to get left behind in the rapture. You know, don't take the mark when we've gone. This fella said, "Don't take the mark after we've gone." And when, don't panic when you're still here. Because when you ask for the scripture, they can't give it you, so it's a belief. Well, we can believe a lot of things. I used to believe work hard and pay your bills, mate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're in interesting territory. Like, for example, Judaism is probably, I mean, it's obviously it's a very well-known world religion, even though there's a relatively small number of Jews in the world relative to other religions. But ethnicity and religion are not combined, really, apart from with Jews. You know, you can be Jewish, and then, okay, you can be a non-believing Jew. So some people think the ethnicity has primacy. You know, you're an Israelite or whatever the modern state is considered to be. But the ethnicity and the religious bit are not the same. And I do think the only definition of a Jew these days isn't ethnic genetic. It's believes that Yahweh, from our perspective, Old Testament, from their point of view, the Tanakh, is God. And of course, Christians don't disagree with that. Ones who are real Christians. I mean, the fakers who suggest that Yahweh is a demiurge, well, you know, we can't really speak about them. The pseudo-Gnostics. But, you know, Yahweh is God. So,
but we look at the New Testament, and it says that all those who are of Israel and all those who are Jews are the ones who are circumcised in the heart, those circumcised inwardly and not outwardly. So when we're talking about Jews, we automatically look for the ethnic group of Jewish people who have been circumcised on the exterior, on the out, but that is not God's people. God's chosen people are the ones who believe in Jesus, but the ones that you know, I know we could debate on it, but the remnants of these tribes, the ones that are named, there's no number on the Gentiles. So it's when the Gentiles come in, when the number of the Gentiles are complete, nobody knows what that number is. But the tribes have all got 12,000 each. No, that's not a specific number, but there's a number of these people that are all named. And I think the deeper as you go into these studies, you know, I'm studying one at the minute that I was just touching on there, where Jesus was talking about Luke, about the things that are spoken about. You know, like what we're talking about in dark places where we're trying to get people to understand. Those words are going to be eventually shouted from the rooftops. So I think there's people that's got a lot more to play and a lot more fight in this game. It's just that we've got to be humble enough to accept that there's information out there that could change a lot about your own nature, because, you know, with the last 15 years, Alex, I know it's shook me right to my core to actually find out again, who am I? Who am I meant to be? Who was I? You know, all that's you've got to try and work out in the middle of trauma. It's difficult, and then somebody will send you a link for a job. You know, because that's the only issue. Well, you just need a job. If that was the only issue, that wouldn't have been a problem. It's everything that's come with it. It's that people in, you know, a career that people can just play with, just because they have a difference of an opinion towards you, they have the power to then torture you and, you know, destroy your life. That's not just about just going out and getting another job when armed police have been called at court to help steal your private property that you inherited, and you can't understand how are they getting away with this. So you spend time, you learn how and why they got away with it, and then you present it to people who want to just shout at you and call you names and say that you're wrong. If you can't get past that, if those people can't get past that, that is a lack of humility. And, you know, your pride and arrogance will see you fall.
Sometimes, though, mate, I do think a lot of it's to do with nuance. And nuance is important because of discernment. So I'll give you an example as a parallel to what you said. It's common for people in the ecumenical movement to suggest that all churches should just come together, Roman Catholic, evangelical, various different Protestant denominations, and even the ecumenical movement can even extend into other religions, so you get interfaith dialogue. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I can see definite drawbacks to it. But what I would say is there does need to be interfaith dialogue between Jews and Christians, and not just to benefit the Jews, to benefit Christians. And this is where this nuance comes in, because there are some tensions, because Jesus was Yahweh incarnate. So the thing about that is, until about the 2nd century of the Christian era, Jews were not monotheistic. You know yourself about the angel of the Lord, and in Second Temple Judaism, it's very clear in the language of the Old Testament that there's Yahweh and the angel of the Lord. So, you know, in Exodus 33, no one shall see the face of God and live, and Moses has to be hidden in the cleft of the rock, and he only sees the back of God after he's passed by. And Jesus is described as the image of the invisible God in Paul's letters, icon, the icon. We can't look on the Father, well, we say the Father in Christian parlance, and we equate the Father with Yahweh. But Jews until the 2nd century, because of a reaction against Christianity, they were not monotheistic in the strict sense. They were binitarian, whereas Christianity is Trinitarian, because the Father, Yahweh, from Judaism, got morphed into the Father, and Jesus spoke of the Father, and then because of the coming of the Holy Spirit, the idea of God developed into triune, right? So Trinitarian. But prior to that, Judaism was binitarian, and it's only since, you know, the 2nd century that because of Phariseeism, they clamped down and went back to a strict monotheism, because they realized that Christianity had blurred the distinction. But Judaism always had this funny relationship between the essence of God that was unknowable and the phenomenological presentation of God as the angel of the Lord, the one who went forth. We saw it with Abraham before Sodom and Gomorrah, the 3 personages. 2 went off to Sodom and Gomorrah described as angels, 1 stays with Abraham. So that's probably a pre-incarnate Jesus from a Christian point of view. For the Jews, they know there's something going on. They know that it's not just a simple unitary concept of Yahweh. He has a representative that is him in accessible form. So I think, same with the festivals. You know, if you talk about Easter compared to Passover, and when I'm looking at this Jewish woman who's now making noises, and she was open when I talked about Zechariah 12:9, I did it kind of a poetic form. They shall look upon him whom they have pierced. But she's been pierced. She's been pierced by Judaism's failure in its festivals to uphold her sense of justice. So she feels alienated, a bit like Jesus. So she can recognize that's why she respects Jesus, because she's undergoing a similar suffering. And when it was said, you know, the Jews said at the crucifixion, let his blood be upon our children's heads and our children's children's heads, they invoked a curse on themselves. And this woman is really struggling with stuff, but she still seems to be, you know, wrestling with that, and now deeply admires Jesus, although she's not. She's a Messianic Jew, but she still doesn't believe that Jesus was Messiah, but she doesn't reject him either as worthless. She sees him as a man she deeply admires and respects. So there's definitely a shift in deep thinking Jews still acknowledging the festivals, that some of those who try to remain pure to the old Judaism are actually coming to recognize that there's something missing, and they're starting to come full circle, and some of them are starting to recognize, oh yeah, now the fake Jews, calling the synagogue of Satan, or however people want to describe them, you know, from Revelation chapter 2 and 3, they're not going to do so because they were never Jews in the first place. So, but those who were genuine, traditional Jews who believed in Yahweh, but didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah, if we could take them back to before the 2nd century AD, they would be able to recognize what's been obliterated in their own traditions, that you had God and his representative, the angel of the Lord, who was God's presence in this scene of time. So they were more binitarian, not monotheistic. And the jump then to Trinitarianism is nowhere near as big. So to me, there's definite movements, mate. Definite movements in certain Jews who are sincere Jews but haven't accepted Jesus yet. And I think it's them that's gonna make that next step.
What does your friend think of as Isaiah 53?
I've not specifically gone down that path. I've stayed clear of that because she'll probably have immunizing stratagem. She'll have heard it so many times that I just don't bother going there. I brought Zechariah 12:9.
This is why what you're just saying there about it was by you and God rather than a Trinitarian God. Is it because we're coming from the end and going backwards because we didn't get the promise? Because when I look at things like in the Old Testament, now this is meant to be, as Jesus said to the Pharisees, are you doctorates in this law and you don't know this stuff? So for me, if I look at the Old Testament and when I read that Deuteronomy 32:6 is speaking of the Father, when I read that Isaiah 9:6 is speaking of the Son, and then 2 Samuel 23:2 and 3 is speaking of the Holy Spirit, and Deuteronomy 6:4 says the Lord is one, I don't know where you can go anywhere else other than the New Testament depicts the Old Testament absolutely perfectly. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they all act as one nature, three separate persons. It's something that I've said it to you many times, Alex. It's something that's never been, I've never had to question it. It just made too much sense. It's just easy to take. So when you've got these Jews who are then reading their Old Testament and can't see that, well, who's the Spirit? Who is that? Who's the Son? People said that the Son's not mentioned in the Old Testament. We can see it is mentioned in Proverbs as well. What is his name and what is the name of his son? We know that this. So that you were saying there, there's the Father and the Son. Well, we've also got the Spirit mentioned. The Holy Spirit is mentioned in the Old Testament. So we've got the Trinity. It's just not there in word. It's like saying, well, the word Bible's not in the Bible. It's not. Jesus doesn't say, I am God, worship me. Well, he says this, and that is attributed to God, and you're meant to worship him. And he's saying, do that to me, what you would do to God. Is that not like saying, I am God? To say, no, it's not. It's, it's getting ridiculous.
It's a biblical theology thing, though, because the Holy Spirit in the New Testament and for Christians is intimately and inextricably associated with Pentecost. And Pentecost is a reflection of the reversal of Babel, where the tongues were basically scattered. And it's a clear inversion, saying that basically when the Holy Spirit comes, the work of inversion of what was inverted through the attempt to reach up to heaven with Babel's Tower is complete, because everybody hears these different, from their different languages, they hear the one truth. So this is the only way to build a tower into heaven, which is the tower that God built back to heaven by having come down to earth. So our understanding of the Spirit, Holy Spirit, as Christians connected to Pentecost, is different than the Old Testament understandings of the Spirit. You as a Christian can look back and see that it's a foreshadowing descriptions of the Spirit in the Old Testament, but it's not quite the same. The full fruition comes at Pentecost, and Jews can't make that leap because they've not made the leap to accepting that Jesus is the Messiah that they were waiting for. So they've still got Yahweh, but They still think it's a monotheistic Yahweh because of what the Pharisees did in the 2nd century, because they were scared of Christianity, because it was leaking at the edges. Even they realized from the own scripture, the angel of the Lord went before it, and actually it was Yahweh. Well, how can it be Yahweh in heaven and Yahweh on earth? And they were having a problem with it. So the Pharisees had to suppress it 200 years after Christ to stop the Jews waking up to it. That's why they went back to strict monotheism. This is the problem we're dealing with.
Yeah, you're right.
It's very, very tough one.
That was a very long-winded way of going round it, but again, it's the Netanyahu thing. We've got to all that because of what Netanyahu and what the Americans are involving Israel, whether it's all part of a plan or if Israel's controlling everything. These are the things we're trying to work out the script for. So this is probably a good point for you to present your share your stuff now, Taylor. So do you want to bring it up and I'll add it?
Okay. So okay. So oh, there we go. So we might as well just talk about this with the current geopolitical situation. So right now, so let's go ahead and read this. In the wake of the staged Wag the Maduro action in Venezuela, as expected and in accordance with what the editorial board of the Anti-New York Times started reporting well before Q Post 140's November 11th, 2017 confirmation, Trump's partners in coordination, China and Russia, are now buzzing about their own rights to assert influence in their respective sectors of the globe. Also acting in coordination with Russia and China, I probably pronounced that wrong, are New York Times, by amplifying the claims of China and Russia, and geopolitical expert, quote-unquote, Fiona Hill in quotes, possibly, fired by Trump in 2019, currently of the Brookings Institution, or Brookings Institution in quotes. It's hard to tell which of these businesses are really seriously running anymore and which are just under control. It's like the Supreme Court and Congress at this point. Regardless, from one of the articles, quote, for the two countries long seen as America's chief adversaries, Russia and China, there is a tinge of opportunity. Foreign policy analysts said, if we have the right to be aggressive in our own backyard, said Fiona Hill, a Russia expert at the Brookings Institution, why can't they? Ms. Hill was the senior director for European and Russian affairs of the White House during part of Mr. Trump's first term. In the spring of 2019, she told a congressional hearing later that year, Russia quietly signaled it was ready to cut loose its ally, Mr. Maduro, in exchange for the United States stepping back from Ukraine. Even as Mr. Putin stayed out of the spotlight, Mr. Medvedev, one of Russia's most publicly hawkish officials, gave voice to the Kremlin's pragmatism. Let's put it bluntly, he told the TASS news agency, referring to the United States. Now they have no grounds, even formally, to reproach our country. End quote. From the other featured article, quote, you want us out of your backyard, the informal Russians went, in Miss Hill's telling. We have our own version of this. You're in our backyard in Ukraine. Now Russia could well have more luck with such a geopolitical swap, given that Mr. Trump's rhetoric shows that everything can be traded, she said in an interview on Monday, end quote. There it is.
So just to interject on that, because it said just a bit further up, it said, well, you said Russia, it's Q Russia and China, meaning China. Are you saying then that the higher ups are the Q higher ups are controlling Russia and China as part of this?
Controlling would be the wrong word. They're working together. It's because, as Q said back in 2017, he said, and people were calling this even before that, Trump, Putin, and Xi are working together to defeat the New World Order, and it's been that way for at least the last decade or so. has pretty much been so when we talk about Russia and China, really we're talking about Putin and Xi, which have been collaborating with Trump this whole entire time, which is ironic considering the fact that that's what they accused. That's exactly what the mainstream fake news media accused Trump of doing back in 2017 during the Russia hoax investigation. The ironic thing is they were actually right. It's just that the reasons they were stating were wrong. So at the end of the day, it shows that these three countries have, and among others as well, it's not just these three, have been working together against, first of all, to cleanse their own deep states, as they have been doing for a while, but also to work together to defeat the globalist cabal, which we can clearly see has pretty much been accomplished. This is more of a geopolitical optical move on the part of these countries to assert to the public who controls what parts of the world at this point. So there we go. There it is. The mighty U.S. asserts benevolent protective leadership over the Americas, mighty Russia over Ukraine, Europe, and Central Asia, and mighty China over Taiwan, East Asia, and Africa. That's the multipolar world which Putin openly advocated for years before Trump even came down the escalator. And then here's the post I was just talking about. Q post 140 on November 11th, 2017. What if China, Russia, and others are coordinating with POTUS, meaning Trump, to eliminate the New World Order? No New World Order for you.
What replaces the New World Order, Taylor?
The multipolar world, just like it just did, which is that each actually let me just, I think that actually I can answer that with the rest of this. Let me just continue. First of all, no one knew. This is a very badly drawn example rendering here, but it gets the general point across. So, no New World Order for you, schemer, referring to the Zionists and the globalists. Now would be an excellent teachable moment for relatively recently awakened, post-2017, quote-unquote Q-tards, to reflect upon and appreciate the historic roles played by Vladimir the Great since 2000 and Xi the Great since 2012, and bringing the New World Order juggernaut to a pause until Commander Trump, fronting for the Q operation, could complete the Troika, which has delivered the knockout blow to both the One World Scheme and the Greater Israel Project. Putin, speaking before European globalists gathered in Munich in 2007, quote, What is a unipolar world? However one might embellish this term, at the end of the day, it refers to one type of situation, namely one center of authority, one center of force, one center of decision-making. It is a world in which there is one master, one sovereign. And at the end of the day, this is pernicious not only for all those within this system, but also for the sovereign itself, because it destroys itself from within. End quote. And then Xi in Moscow in 2015, quote, the independent, mature, and resilient China-Russia relationship not only brings great benefits to the two peoples, but also makes important contributions to maintaining global strategic stability and promoting an equal and orderly multipolar world. End quote. And then Trump in 2016, quote, we will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism. America first will be the major and overriding theme of my administration, end quote. The eagle, the bear, and the dragon have smashed the New World Order, and all of the cabal's horses and all of the cabal's men can never put it back together again. All that's left now is for the great replay of the mass arrest and the ushering in of the Golden Age. Always we wait patiently for these developments, and they are coming. Let us be thankful for and savor what has clearly been achieved by the big three. And this is I believe, a grok image right here. A couple of grok images. Pretty good. The Russian bear, the Chinese dragon, and the American eagle have clearly smashed the Jewish cabal's New World Order and Greater Israel plots to bits. In May of 2017, a full 6 months before Q first appeared and soon posted about the coordination between Russia, China, and Trump, Real News in History, then Tomato Bubble, had already called it. That's this guy's website. So, And then last bit right here, read it and weep. The Kudnik man and Trump-hating black pill addicts, with enabler Trump pulling the U.S. out of the Middle East and Russia and China, plus Iran and Turkey, filling the vacuum, there ain't ever going to be a greater Israel. But Trollmaster Trump still claims that he loves you. He. So, I hope that answers your question, which is essentially, you have the New World Order, which is being replaced by what the world is supposed to be, which is a multipolar world of the great big powers asserting their influence in their own hemispheres and protecting them from outside influence, particularly from these little parasites known as globalists or Zionist parasites. This is pretty much how the world's always been for most of human history. So at the end of the day, well, I hope that answered your question, really.
Well, it makes me think that we've always been in some kind of dictatorship, because when you're saying that they're going to control things from the interior, that's what all dictators firstly say. Alex, what do you think of the multipolar world compared to the New World Order? Or is Q one part of a big Jewish plan? And it really is the Jews that say that all the Goyim are going to serve them. Are they the true Jews of God's chosen people, or are they the ones that say that the Jews who aren't? Where are we up to with that?
Really good question, and it was a really good presentation, I think, from Taylor. And the point is, international relations, as we understand it, is a discipline which studies these things, and which, the multipolar world, after the fall of Berlin Wall and so on in the 1990s, was the moment where America, with the project for the New American Century, Wolfowitz and so on and so forth, Cheney and Rumsfeld, they were going to push for that. But that moment passed, and they tried with 9/11, but it would, the stable door had already, opened and the horse had bolted by then. So it's definitely been a clawback. The rise of Xi, Putin's consolidation, this trifecta idea. So, there's no doubt about it. That's what's happening. That's what international relations would say. And international relations, actually, when we talk about Christian theology, we talk about end times, and we give that the fancy name eschatology. The eschaton, it's the end of the age. And basically, international relations is a form of secular eschatology. It talks about the rise and fall of kingdoms and empires, and the rise and fall, for example, of the West. Trump has clearly understood that basically from about 1492, Drake and Vasco da Gama was, I think, 1498. This expansion, where the West overtook China, has now been reversed. It's 500 years. And Trump realized what the Americans before had not realized. They couldn't continue to push forward and colonize the whole world. But that wasn't America. That was America. They'd been colonized by globalists. So basically, they'd taken over the show. And that's what we're still seeing over here in the UK and Europe. So he was a sleeper cell, Trump, in a classic sense, in the analysis. And so the Q narrative makes sense in the context of this framing. So in terms of the multipolar world, that's called realpolitik. And it is, like Taylor said, it's the way the world has been run for the vast amount of the time, but perhaps not with the level of power that we see today with nuclear capacity, communication, joined up world, travel being much faster. We have a much more joined up world. We've got tech, internet, cloud, everything, meaning that, with virtual reality as well, it's blurring divisions, even geographical divisions. So it's just like a ramped up version of what we always saw, and it's returning to that. So that's like secular eschatology. So the conclusion would be, yeah, it's the fall of the West in the classic form that it was, expansionist. It's had to redraw the boundaries to acknowledge the rise of China and also India in the region. Europe is struggling to find its position, doesn't know which way to jump. Starmer's in the melting pot with it. Russia and China could make an allegiance. So, and India was a traditional ally of Britain because we were part of the empire. So we're trying to leverage things with India, as will the US. They could be a real friendly ally. against a Russian-China axis, but better balance. Now, how does that fit in with Christian eschatology? Difficult to say. So from our perspective, like you're saying, you know, a certain form of Zionism, with Trump operating in that way, and that sort of would fulfill the more kind of antichrist ideas. So you got a tension. You got a tension there, and it's not easy to reconcile and to answer your question directly. That's why I've been a little bit around the houses, you know, filling in the background, connecting it with what Taylor said. To actually know which it is, from a Christian point of view, we'd probably still be inclining to saying New World Order is perhaps not the right language. It's the beast system. Now, you know, the beast hates the harlot. Trying to work out the configuration about what the beast is, what the harlot is, and get that spot on to understand what's going on and the place of Islam in all this, because, you know, we mustn't forget that in the analysis. When you look at nation states and secular power, there's certain sanctions you can impose upon other states using power, or super states can impose economic sanctions. You cannot impose sanctions on a people. People are obsessed with the Jews, whatever that means. But when you talk about the Muslims, it's a much bigger Muslim population spread across the world. So Islam is much more difficult to, should we say, domesticate in inverted commas, much more difficult than Christianity even, which is sold out to, you know, Western individualistic culture. So I just think the one thing in the analysis, whichever way we jump to those two sides, and how we try and sort of fit that with a Christian frame, is what's the role of Islam in all this? Because obviously, probably with about 1.4 billion Muslims on the face of the planet, that's a sizable number who could be mobilized in any of a number of ways, peaceable or more radical. Obviously all under Mohammed, and the vast majority of Muslims, funnily enough in the Western world more so, are peaceable. But, you know, the Quran itself isn't. So it's sort of, the claims run totally antithetical to Jesus from Muhammad. So I think we've definitely got to factor in the role of Islam as a religion, not Muslims as, you know, believers, but Islam as a religion, where that fits in.
That's, well, that you've hit the nail on the head, haven't we? Because the ideology of the Islamist is not the same as certainly the friends that I have that are Muslim. They don't do what the Islamist wants to do, but it's quite clear from the narrative that it is being propagated, whether it's whoever factions are propagating it. The Jews are the victims and the perpetrators are the Islamists. That's what we're being shown. But we've just seen in that interview there where that woman has turned on Netanyahu and said, it's not just radical people that are saying you're acting out of order here. These are war crimes. You know, there are certain countries that Netanyahu goes in, he'd be arrested for a war crime. Trump is asking for a pardon for that. So again, we've got to stay humble and ask, you know, the fact that Putin, China, and Trump are all working together, that there's some kind of an order there where we're going back to what we've always had. Well, we are going back to what we've always had because we can all now speak the same language again. So everything's come back to as in the days of Noah. We're all, you know, the big plans that are coming, according to the scriptures anyway, Alex, that there is no happy ending for the world with all this stuff.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's just the sifting. It's the sifting of the wheat and the tares. And that, I think that's the key message from me for these shows, really, is that the key message is that this world's got to go. If it's true, this world's got to go. And if it isn't true, then none of it matters. But to not have paid it any heed, not to have read, not to have researched, that's just like going and paying bills that you shouldn't pay. And if you can't understand that and it can be proven, then we are struggling with the things that you cannot see, especially when if you don't even call, if you don't knock on that door, it's not that they're not coming. The thing is, the scriptures say that the scriptures say that we have angels that are assigned to us to stop us falling from our path, but they don't just act and give us, act like buffers on a bowling alley to keep us out from going into the gutter. You have to invoke, you have to walk, you have to ask. And we don't do this because we're not taught that spirituality that would have come from the Eastern side of philosophy and theology. Yeah. It's all been crammed out of us into, well, you can do whatever you want. You can just raise your vibration, click your heels together 3 times and say God's name in a special kind of way. And you can become the Christ and you can do this. And I'm looking at the same Bible that says, no, I said, don't do that. No man can boast. It's so simple. For anybody who thinks that they can do something, then you go against what it says in the Bible. So it's fine if you believe what you believe, but if it goes against what's in the Bible, don't say you follow the Bible. I mean, if you say you're a Christian and you don't say what's in the Bible, well, at least let's redefine what Christian means then, because we know it was a derogatory term for people who followed what Jesus said. So if Jesus says something and you say, no, he didn't mean that, then that is a special kind of arrogance that I don't know where you go with it. It's like the pre-trib. Jesus says immediately after those times, you'll see me coming back. Yeah, that means he'll come and take us away before anything goes wrong. And I'll just go, well, okay, well, I'm going to stick with the word of God just in case it's true.
Yeah. Critical thinking and knowledge have to go hand in hand. And that's absolutely, you can't, that's a marriage, critical thinking and knowledge. And on that score, I think what we've got to do, I mean, I'd ask Taylor a further question, and it's based on critical thinking allied to knowledge, because everybody knows that originally Trump was branded as a populist like Farage is today. But what people also forget is Bernie Sanders was a left-leaning populist. So he was an alternative to the setup with Hillary at the time. So it was like Trump was a right-wing populist. Bernie Sanders was a left-wing populist who was communistic and anti-billionaire. So he was still playing identity politics, but just against billionaires, which is fashionable. That's what the Greens are doing in this country. They're kind of, so it's like it's the Green New Deal and so on and so forth. And occasional Cortex went in with that as well. But Bernie Sanders, obviously he got stitched up in the Clinton campaign when he won out, and then they just did him over. But he only went into the background. So the point is, he's a left-leaning populist who's been working and talked about a movement. Even before Trump really got into MAGA, it was Bernie Sanders from a left-leaning perspective that said, we need a movement. Now, funnily enough, this is where it gets interesting, because Mamdani is totally and utterly sponsored. He's almost like he's been groomed by Bernie Sanders. And Mamdani is a left-leaning Muslim. So he's the perfect hybrid of the communistic and the left-leaning moderate Islamist. So he's not an Islamist. He's not an Islamist. He is a Muslim. He's a left-leaning Muslim, and he's popular with everyone. And we can say it's cosmetic, and he's the New York mayor, and he's riding on the tube, and we know it's all photo opportunities. But he's groomed by Sanders. So he's a left-leaning populist allied with a version of Islam which is much more attuned to what your average Muslim in this country, in the UK, would think is acceptable. And he's saying all the traditional liberal narrative. He wears that permanent smile. He's perfectly groomed. He ticks all the boxes. He's the kind of person who Zach Polanski could only dream of presenting as on a cosmetic level. So he ticks all those boxes, but he is Bernie Sanders influenced. Yeah, I'm sure I recall in the past Taylor suggesting that Mamdani was just a part of a Q operation. Now, I can't see some method to lull people and to show, how bankrupt that ideology is, so that people would ultimately, he gets into power and then it's bankrupted because everybody leaves, and then they see through it, and it's the best way for the people to realize this is a very good policy in general. But the problem is, because of the connection with Sanders and moderate Muslims rather than fanatical extremist ones, there's a bit of an issue here about how Mamdani fits in, because I struggle to see Mamdani as a Q operation if Sanders is involved, unless Sanders is a part of Q. So what's your position on Sanders, Taylor?
Well, first of all, Sanders has always been Bernie Sanders has always been the kind of candidate who's always been, how should I put it? He's like a William F. Buckley kind of person, the kind of person that's just like, oh, I'm the softer alternative to this, so vote for me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like what's it called? It's kind of like when you wanted to compare Mitt Romney to Obama back in 2012, for example. So the thing about Bernie Sanders is that he's always had this this socialist viewpoint, right? And going back to what you were talking about with the 2016 election, he pretty much did get cheated out of the nomination by Hillary. But I mean, to be fair, let's be real here. Is that doesn't mean we should feel sorry for the dude. It's kind of like the 2000 election. People say Al Gore won, or 24 when they say John Kerry won. It's like, well, even if that's true, I don't feel bad for these people. But regardless, Bernie absolutely is another part is another agent of the Q operation. Whether that's him or someone whether it's actually him under submission or it's somebody else in a mask or whatever. It's a difference without a distinction. The point is that you have to make use of all of these politicians, whether it's Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or any of these politicians. They all have their role to play, whether they're under submission or replaced. I personally think it's the replaced, but regardless, the point is that each of them have their own roles to play when it comes to getting the normies more and more on board with the idea of getting more and more law and order, or rather being on board with the idea of the Insurrection Act, as well as exposing all this fraud. It goes back to what Webby said about I could use the whole what Webby said about Netanyahu, exactly the whole pardon thing. It's called controversy breeds conversation. It's marketing 101. How do you get people to talk about a subject? You talk you say something extremely controversial and bring it out into the limelight. It's just like what Trump is doing with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey. How these are two people who were pretty much relatively unknown. Like, nobody knew about these people, especially Thomas Massey. But ever since Trump started attacking these people, they've almost become household names over the last just few weeks or months alone. So the whole point again is controversy creates conversation, and that's exactly what again with this Mamdani thing as well. Is like, if anyone's seriously, I don't mean to sound like a dick or anything, but if anyone actually thinks that New York in 2025 would actually elect a full-blown communist to be their mayor, and that he would be able to get in and be able to do the things that he's doing without any form of pushback, except for maybe some verbal attacks or whatever, I'm sorry to say, but you're freaking dumb. If anyone thinks that, it's like, bro, all of this stuff, all of these socialists that have been coming out have been behind the scenes, and I've mentioned this before. For anyone who hasn't heard before, I've maintained for years now that all of these people, AOC, Ilhan Omar, the Squad, Mamdani, they're all a part of the operation. And it's just like you said before, Alex. In order to wake people up, you have to piss them off. You have to put them in a position. You have to show them, using the Q-controlled media, a position of hopelessness, a position of, oh, looks like the world is burning, kind of thing. Because that's what it looks like if you look at the media, whether it's social media or especially the mainstream legacy media, and I'm sure it's the same over there in the UK as well. It looks like the world is burning. It looks like it's all going to shit. Then you look around, and then you go outside and you look around you, and it's just like, where did all that go? Where's all the fires burning? Where's all this stuff happening? It just shows that, again, this is all optics, just like what the deep state used to do when it came to their, marketing of the terrorist agenda. Like, oh, there's a terrorist behind every corner that's going to blow up your school, or it's going to shoot, or it's going to do a school shooting or whatever. It's the optics of this agenda in order to wake people up. It's the only way.
It's Sadiq Khan. It's Sadiq Khan part of that, because we've got our own communist mayor that has destroyed London.
Yeah, all of them. It's like, because as you said before, this is a worldwide operation. All of these, and unfortunately speaking, especially for you guys, is that places like the UK and Western Europe in general are so much further down the rabbit hole in terms of full blown communism than over here in the United States. But that's because they've been working on you guys since the end of World War II. So at the end of the day, you guys are probably going to take a bit longer to heal than over here. And I'm sorry to report that, because I know that you guys are suffering a lot over there. I've heard a lot of you guys report a lot of these things from over there. It's bad. All I can really ask though is that just take a look at what's happening over here, and you can see snippets of it happening over in the UK as well, and in France and Germany, etc. When you have more and more of these populist conservative leaders gaining more and more prominence, and I'm not just talking about Nigel Farage, but also the AfD party in Germany, whoever that was in France, I forget who it was. Same thing in Denmark, Norway, etc. Like, it's happening all over the world. It's just a matter of getting the people on board, and there's several different audiences that the Q operation is aiming towards as well. Like, it's not just a broad stroke of a brush. You have your CNN and your MSNBC or BBC low IQ voters whom the Q team use the mainstream media in order to subtly program them with certain pieces of information in their own way. Then you have the more quote unquote intelligent high IQ people watching stuff like PBS and NPR and stuff like, or Real America's Voice, etc. I say high IQ in quotes because it's just a bunch of verbosity that means nothing. But regardless, my point is that each of these different things have different audiences. The UK has their own audience, unfortunately, that the Q team has to appeal to, because, well, London became essentially the socialist package over the last few decades. And I know it's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but the straight up answer to your question is yes. That's part of it's part of the operation. Absolutely.
So
yeah.
I've got to ask Paul a question then. So in this case, right, Paul, if what Taylor's saying is right, and we look at things in terms of eschatology, Christian eschatology, it would appear that the way the theological direction would be going would be to, you've got pre and post-millennialism. It would be a post-millennial return of Jesus, because you'd have a 1,000-year golden age, because before Christ returned, and that would be because all this evil that was going on actually got turned around, and you have a golden age where what we currently see as the right wing and the whole Q thing and so on has successfully turned around the tide of evil, and then we get a golden age, whether it's a literal 1,000 years or not, before things then go south again. So how do you read that then, Paul? Because if all the bad guys are just obviously being routed, and the movement that started in the States is going to spread to right-wing populist movements in Europe, and then there'll be no bad guys anymore.
It's a little bit difficult, because I think I see it differently.
Right.
When Satan was bound at the cross, Jesus died and then rose and went to sit at the right hand of the Father. All authority in heaven and earth was given to him at that point. So he reigns now. So this 1,000 years, I can't. The Bible's not literal on numbers. 1,000 years just means a while. Now, we've had, according to our Gregorian, we've had about 2,000 years since Satan was bound, and he also, during that time, what have we had? We've had a lot of conflict, a lot of fight. We've had where Christianity was going to get pulverized and demolished, and then we've had revivals upon revivals. Then it's got mixed. They can't control it anymore after the Reformation, so they have to mix it with philosophy and New Age and all those kind of things, and that's where we get the Renaissance. And then all of a sudden, everybody's got all these new ideas. I think what's happening is what we're seeing is, it's looking like this golden age is coming, and these things are being exposed. But we're warned against this. We're warned to see that these people who are doing this, they're going to announce peace and safety. And this religion, whether it's anything to do with the one world order or not, the one world religion is going right ahead. It's trundling right down the tracks at the moment. Totally led by the Vatican, which says that all religions can go to God. So for me, the scripture is still, it's ticked off all those prophecies that have been fulfilled. And I see that this millennial reign thing, I think this has got to end with the tribulation, because at some point Satan has to come back into this world, because this is his prison. And when he's cast back in, those days are going to be cut short, because there'll be nobody left, and Jesus is coming in. That'll be judgment. So I think whatever people talk about with the millennial reign or 1,000 years, if we're talking about when Christ reigns, when he comes back, it says it's forever. It's not when I come back, it's not for a few years, it's forever. So when he comes back, it's going to be forever. So the 1,000 years has got to be before he comes back. So as we talk about the golden era could be presented in such a way like multipolar societies, which we've always had.
Exactly. Interesting, isn't it? When is a golden age not a golden age? And yet it could have some features clearly resembling something that was much better than it looked like it was going to be going, which could be a form of decoying. So it optically it can look a lot better. Was it Gesara, Nasara, and suddenly it's not stealing money off people; it's liberating everyone, like a year of jubilee from the debt. So you can recast it as a positive instead of a negative, and sort of manipulate the demographics.
That's where I see the Christianity thing being manipulated in to get what I put in speech marks, the Christians. So all the ones who are going to the likes of Kenneth Copeland and Joel Osteen and all the other shills that promote all that stuff that they do. People think that they're saved just because they get that giddy feeling and happy clappy stuff. I think it's a slow boat, and it's not going to China. I think you've got to be honest with what you're doing, who you're following. I personally can't put my reliance in any man, but does that mean that a man cannot do good things? Of course he can. If you look at, I think Taylor mentioned Cyrus, or was it you, Alex, that mentioned Cyrus? Now Cyrus had no dog in the fight when it comes to religion. He was a humanitarian. Women shouldn't be treated like that. People shouldn't be treated as slaves. They have the right to do . But he had no inkling into God and authority. He wanted to do the right thing by people. But God uses everybody, including the destroyers, to, the Assyrian was his servant. These things are all done, all the bad is done to bring the good. And the ones who are, we've had this conversation about the potter. He makes the clay for what he makes the clay for. He makes some to be destroyed, and he makes other. Does that mean he predestines everybody? Well, I think we've all got an open destiny, but we all predestine ourselves when we are influenced through invisible forces that can affect our emotions so much. This is again why we always bring it when we talk about women females because of the amount of emotional aspects that they have, how more highly strung they are compared to a male. Why would the serpent deceive Eve and not Adam? Because Adam would have said, no, we won't be doing that. But all of a sudden, it was all that emotion, it was all that thought, it was, it was enough. And, you know, we're born from parents who've got their own traumas. Those traumas are passed on to us. It can't not be. So I think we're born into societies where the dragon is waiting for us, the seed of the woman. The dragon's waiting to brainwash all the children of that seed into nothing. And we're all blind. And the only way that blind can be ripped off is when you're put into a position where you've no more choices left, Alex. You're on, you know, for me, it was on that caravan floor, 18 pints of Stella in, saying, I don't want to be here anymore. I think that's when God can step in and say, do you want to have a look at this? Would you like to look at this? Or you just get to the point and you scream out. You know, I've known absolute atheists who, when there's nothing left, they've screamed from the top of their lungs to God, and God's come to them. Who's to say that can't happen to each and every one? Everyone who can even hear this broadcast now, to say that there could be the truth lying in a preserved word that could save you, your families, from eternal torture. If that could be true, would it be worth having a look at? Or are you so prideful and so arrogant that you know more than anybody else? Because if you don't know that you live in a debt-based economy and you're a creditor and you should be acting a certain way, then I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of things that you can be lied to about. And it doesn't matter what you believe, it's what the evidence shows. And if there's question, that's called science in it, Alex. While we're questioning, we call it science until we get to a process where repeating and we keep getting the same answers, then we can say, well, let's call it fact now, let's call it truth, until something else comes in, because nobody's got any questions until maybe 2 years down the line, somebody has a question and we can reopen it. But that's called having a dialogue. That's called using critical thinking and common sense and bringing logic into an equation. Now, if you really do think, as we discussed, that we've got Muslim friends who really don't think at all at any point to putting any kind of device on themselves and going shouting Allahu Akbar and blowing themselves up, they don't relate to that kind of mentality. But we are seeing that there is that mentality. You don't see it in anything else. So we've got to be honest with what we're seeing. We've got to be honest that there's a propaganda going on. I don't mean when a Cockney has a really good look at something. What we're being taught is it's without critical thinking and just acceptance, then we just dance to the tune, don't we? The Pied Piper plays and we just sway.
Yeah.
Anyway, Taylor, thanks for that. Like as Alex said, it was a good presentation, good to add to it tonight. Do you want to, in closing, sum it up and give out your details where people can contact you?
Okay, so oh my goodness. Okay, so first off, all I can really say is that like to connect things is well, first thing we need, I think one of the major thing we need that we need aside from mass arrests and aside from the justice phase and of course the economic revival golden age, is we need a cultural revival. That's another huge thing that we need, and I'm sure that you can sympathize with that.
Whose culture? We've got quite a bit of cultural going on already.
Oh, you know what? Come on, you know what I mean. Oh man, we need a huge cultural revival. Back to
Yeah,
sanity.
wait. Yeah, cultural. Wait till the Haitians move in next door and your cat's gone missing.
Oh, oh god. No, that's dear god, that's terrible. But okay, but yeah, I mean, you pretty much get the gist of it.
Yeah.
So where to contact me at? I'll just say, well, first of all, my Rumble channel is Raconteurs Report. You might also find it under Jason Holmes. Yes, I understand the name. I can't change it. I wanted to. Rumble's fucking dumb sometimes. I'm sorry, part of my language, but it does some stupid stuff. But regardless, that's my Rumble page. I just finished reading the book God versus Darwin, debunking the myth of evolution, and going into proving that a creator that God does exist, that a creator does exist, regardless of what form of religion that you want to apply yourself to. So yeah, I just finished that. But yeah, I just finished that. It was a good book as usual. My Twitter page is at Chimpy Skippy. I think that's how you'll find it. The name of itself is oh my god, my freaking the name should also be Raconteurs Report. That's what the name should pop up as. My email is at chimpyskippy at gmail.com. And my YouTube page is also Raconteurs Report, but I don't really have much uploaded on there right now just because I'm kind of worried about YouTube sacking me again, like for like the 5th, 6th, actually no, more than that at this point, like maybe the 10th time at this point. And aside from that, please support the works of those in the Anon movement on places like Rumble and BitChute. You know, there's so many channels that I could list. I don't have time to go into them here. Just a couple of them would be Patriot Underground, Real News and History, News Trees and Channel 17, etc. There's so many that I can't get into them here. But yeah, my point is, those are my place. Those are the places you can get a hold of me. Please like and subscribe, and just as of course with Webby as well. And hit the positive affirmation button and share this information around, because right now we are digital soldiers, and our role is to try to inform people as much as possible. You know, this war isn't going to be won by going guns blazing or going out in the street and protesting. It's about information. It's about giving people the information that they're if they're willing to look at it. And
that's exactly right, that mate. That's why we give them all the information. What they do with it, even if they can't see it, mate, that's it. We have it all. We have it all the time with pearls before swine. If you don't believe what's in the Bible, then okay, you know it's just one of those things. So very well put, mate. Thanks for giving up your time, Taylor, to come on and share this information with us.
Yes, and let me say one more thing, and that's that when the mass drop does happen and the arrests do start happening, be ready, because I'm sure that there'll be many people willing to come to people like us for information, because they'll be seeking it. So always be ready for that day, no matter how unlikely that it ends up being.
Will do. Okay, mate. Good night.
Yep.
God bless. We'll speak to you next week, God willing.
Yeah, God
Right,
bless.
so-
See you guys next time.
Cheers, Taylor. Alex, in wrapping up.
Yeah. I went away to what was then Polytechnic. It wasn't a university in Teesside, Middlesbrough, in 1986 in September. I'm a Sunday school teacher. On the inside, I was a rebel. And the inside of the front cover of a book, Richard Wurmbrand, Reaching Toward the Heights, a guy who'd been in prison, for a number of years in communist countries. And he had to befriend a rat. He was in solitary confinement, and God sent him a rat. And he wrote these daily devotions over 365 days. I remember when she gave it to me, I thought, oh, what's she doing, this Sunday school teacher, give me this book? And I never looked at it. until I got back after I'd had my Ouija board experience at the end of that year, which totally shook my world. And it was Jeremiah 29:11 written on the inside, "For I know the thoughts and plans that I have for you, says the Lord. Thoughts and plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." And I'd just seen evil. This Ouija board experience I had was really powerful, frightening. And it destabilized my worldview that had been purely materialistic, mocking the church. I think it's a load of garbage. So I'd rejected it. I hadn't been socialized in the church. I'd rejected it. Like I said earlier, the guy with the tannoy, this Welsh coal miner, salty earth guy, Mr. Davis Percy, he got me into the church. I'd used it socially because I'd been bullied, and it was a safe haven for me. I used to enjoy going to the youth group, but I never bought in because I saw aspects of the witness in that church as a bit plastic. And yet that was a starting point for me on my journey. And then this Sunday school teacher's words inside this book cover that I just totally dismissed, almost mockingly. Then a year later, this perfect word being written inside this book. Was I worthy of that? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm a human being. I'm flawed. But I had suffered from being very young. I was battling against the odds, struggling. But I was being prepared. And it's nearly 40 years that I was in a wilderness from September 86. So September 2026, it'll have been 40 years. I'm fully expecting a full disclosure of what the future is going to bring for me in terms of how I'm going to be in service for the kingdom of God. And, I'm probably about 8 months away from that now. I will have had a 40-year detour. It doesn't mean that I've not been Christian. I've had my moments in and out in the wilderness. My theology sometimes gone off-piste, but I come back strengthened, been all over the shop, learned stuff, assimilated stuff. Your journey started in 2017. Couldn't have been much different in many ways, and yet under COVID, we came back together in Angie's house, and for the first time you had a Christian confession, and here we are today. I think what I'm saying is God has a plan. We hear about Q, and the merits of Q, there definitely is some resonance, and humans with the best will in the world are flawed. Sometimes we rely on them. It's good that Q has a plan, and if it comes to fruition, happy days. But ultimately, we see a plan in our lives. Mine's panned out now. I'm 57, and for nearly 40 years now, I've been on a journey that could be, compared to a wilderness, and it's been difficult at points. And sometimes you think, is it ever going to get to the place I need it to be? But God writes with his fingerprints and his fingertip onto the tablet of our hearts, and we need to have a fleshy and receptive heart if that's going to be having any value, if it's going to reach into people. We've got years of life, decades of life that we can call upon. We can waste our life. Some people might live to a ripe old age and they might as well have lived in a shoebox, and others might only live 20 years, but they cover so much territory and they contribute so much. So, it's down to us, but it's also down to God. And I'm just thankful that when you cry out sincerely, you'll be heard. That's absolutely my conviction. I wasn't crying out, but something in my soul was crying out for justice, was crying out for a better way than everything that I'd ever known. And God looks after me. And he's brought you through all those trials, all the things that you lost, Paul. And now you've got, your grandson, and you've got things turning around in your life as well. So no matter what the schedule is, no matter what it looks like, no matter what the superficial differences are, there's one way, and that's not just a theological creed, because it's born into your life. And if you have faith, and if you want to have that experience, you can open your heart and your mind, and you can ask Jesus Christ to disclose himself to your soul, to your spirit, like Paul and Saul on the Damascus road, he became Paul. And I would just encourage people, don't think it's a fairy tale. What have you got to lose?
Exactly right. As we were saying, we were talking about information. We need all the information. What you do with it is down to you. Just in closing, I just want to draw people's attention to there's a meeting. Carlo, who's been holding meetings at Lower House Cricket Club in Burnley, he's been, he's had some great guest speakers on there. Matt Letitia was on at the last one. He's invited past speakers to come and do a support on this one, and the main speaker is going to be Andrew Bridge. And whatever your opinion is on Andrew and his information, it's information. You take the information. People are talking about stuff that wasn't talked about. I know John Wedger is a big supporter of Andrew Bridgen, and John was talking about paedophile rings that were being covered up by the Metropolitan Police when nobody else was, even when people were saying he's getting paid to do that, he's a shill. Stop with those things. Just take the information. That's all I'm saying is the information is for you to discern, not what somebody else says that person is like. So you've got Andrew's the main speaker, Mark Devlin's supporting. We've got Josephine Wallow, who does trusts and wills, Andy Woodward. We've got support from Right Said Fred, David Michael Shaler, David Aylman, known as the People's Lawyer, Callie Spell, the Realm of England, Steph Weaver, Lancashire Farmers Movement, Mike Bowman and Stacey Bradley, both of Cabby, Ant Critchley, Avis Al, which is an aviation expert, Gillian L. England, and some bloke called Paul Webster is there as well. So that's on the Twitter. Hey?
I believe so.
Aye. I don't know if anybody listened to him. Not many have.
Hey, well, you know what I'm thinking, Paul? I don't think it's. I think it's the rest of the speakers that need to be listening.
Yeah.
Because you'll bring the Jesus dimension.
Yeah, there's some good people in there that have done a lot of work to try and help people, and it's nice for those people to come together and say, we've all thrown our tuppence into this pot. Let's see what we can buy with it for now. So that's on the 25th of Jan at Lower House Cricket Club. It's not Lower House, is it? Let me get the address right. It's Lower House Cricket Club, Burnley Lancs. I did get it right. And that's going to be from 1 p.m. on the 25th. I think it's £20 donation on the door to all the speakers, but there's stuff on there as well. But like I said, it's about supporting. When Carlo started that up, it was all from his own pocket, and it was all from people who put into the People's Shadow Council, because people have had enough, and people come together and they wanted to get speakers on who got those little bits of information to come and give those nuggets. Once we can get those nuggets of information, then we can join the dots and we can see what you can do in your areas. Cabby is one of those that's linked with other agencies that we can all use to get a foothold and take over the council. As I said, the shadow council stuff, it just makes sense. We have a shadow cabinet, and we have the shadow council will be able to check what the council's doing. We should be able to check the same books and all that. And when that's rallied against by the local council, you tend to think, well, what are you trying to hide by us doing that? Carlo's also, he's had a dabble with information back from the DVLA where when he registered a vehicle, he registered it without the title Mr., Miss or Mrs., everything in lowercase, and gets it in writing that he's told that he can still tax an MOT's car, but they're unable to register it, and that may cause issues with police legislation. Meaning what? Meaning that it's not a car that is registered for commerce, potentially. So maybe these are ways and means that we can start to get control of the registration process, because bearing in mind that land registry, every house is registered as commercial on presumption because of how we have been taught to register. So again, take all the information from these people, but discern it. Go on, sorry,
Cabby,
mate.
Cabby is the community assemblies for the British Isles, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, just for those who don't know, and it could be useful for people who've not had any dealings with it to try and find the local one by Googling it, because it's a support structure which also supports, like you say, with shadow councils, that it's trying to create some leverage, because a single individual cannot stand against these power structures. They just shut you down. But if people can connect in these ways, yeah, exactly. So that's what we need, people to be a part of those things. If nothing else, just to get a support structure and solidarity, and anything else is a bonus, any leverage against it. People movements building in that way. A friend of ours posted on Facebook the other day, and, you know, in frustration really about lack of collective action, lack of solidarity, lack of planning. You can't just think up a group one day and suddenly millions of people join it and they all lived happily ever after. These things take a perilously long time. All of this came out of COVID and all the stuff that happened, and it really kicked into gear at the end of 2020. So it's taken 5 years. Okay, it's been going, but 5 years we can get to the point of mobilising the likes of Letitia, Bridge, and several others. So, you know, it is something, you know, when we look at collective action sometimes, we think, you know, especially when we talk about God, we're not talking about sitting on our hands. We are talking about discerning where the line is between what God does and what we do. It's like we've still got to play a part without thinking that we are going to turn the ship around, because we are not going to turn the ship around.
No, and do you know what? We'll just end on this one if this video plays, mate, because it's interesting what you said there about how everything, you know, it's took 5 years to realise.
Yeah.
Just look at what they've now decided that they've just realised in the US.
For decades, we've been fed a corrupt food pyramid that has had a myopic focus on demonizing natural, healthy, saturated fats, telling you not to eat eggs and steak, and ignoring a giant refined carbohydrates, added sugars, ultra-processed food.
They turned the pyramid back the right way, mate. How amazing, eh? All that food pyramid from the 70s, all that stuff we were...
Yeah.
And we're right back where we started.
One of the Scandinavian countries, I don't know if it was Sweden, did it about 7 or 8 years ago. So slowly the drip feed effect. But in the end, just goes to show that a concerted trickle over time, the tributaries can come together. And there's definitely something. We feel despair thinking, yeah, I'm just little me. But actually, if you connect up with the right people over time, and it does take time, there can be pushback. We can only do what we can do. But I think we do what we can do, but then we pray. I mean, ultimately, you got to do both. You know, that was a failing of Israel, not trusting in God. You know, you got to get your allegiances right, and also, you know, your community. Trust your community, as well as trusting God, and that's your best possible recipe for turning the ship around.
Spot on, mate. Thanks for everybody who's made it this far on the live chat. Your support is really, really appreciated. Get a lot of messages through the week. Any questions that I get towards Taylor, direct them to Taylor. He's best to cut out the middleman and speak to him direct for things like that. But thanks to everybody in the chat room. Thanks to people who've made it this far watching after the live chat. Hope that, you know, we've touched on a few things that have sent some vibrations down the web and get you into looking at some of this stuff and using that critical thinking that we all have. It's just, you know, the critical thinking needs to be engaged. God willing, we'll see you all next week, guys. Good night. God bless.
Thanks, guys. Good night.